Ladies, gentlemen, and Spiritborn of all ages. Oh, that felt good to say. Welcome to Vessel of Hatred and Season 6, or at least this early look at it that I am allowed to bring to you today. We had access to the review build for the expansion thanks to Blizzard themselves, and through this I got the opportunity to just play the hell out of Spiritborn, the new class. And to be frank, my favorite class now in the game as of this immediate moment. Druid used to be conceptually my favorite, I loved the ideas behind it. Barbarian had the most visceral and impactful feeling gameplay to me, and Rogue felt the smoothest to actually play on. But now that Spiritborn exists, it's sort of like the best of all three, in my opinion. Incredibly luscious visuals and animation, a lot of super impactful feeling abilities that reverberate through the actual sound system, and it plays as smooth as the jazz that you were conceived to. So today, before we get into the season itself, let's talk about Spiritborn as a whole, where it looks to sit compared to the power level of the other classes in Season 6 specifically, and why, and just some of the build concepts that I messed with and found success with on the review build, as well as some things I've heard from other creators, and a couple that I think have the potential to just be the best builds in the game once you can put a couple of hundred hours grinding them on the actual live servers when the season begins. First things first, then let's talk about general power and the sort of template that all strong Spiritborn builds will come up off of. Spiritborn is in all likelihood going to be the strongest class in the game this season. Sorceress has been killing it up until now, but they were doing so with Lightning Spear, which is receiving nerfs in the day one patch that we didn't have when we played it here. So all of Sorc's hopes of being the best class at this stage rely on just how impactful the Elemental Daggers build with the severely buffed Constellation aspect gets, but all that to say, just Sorc has moved down in the rankings. Rogue has moved down a bit as well, Druid has been pushed down too, Barbarian was pushed down from the PTR, but it was busted on the PTR, but not necessarily pushed down from where it was in Season 5, which was just sort of middling really, and Necromancer is still just sort of doing okay with a couple of relatively good builds, but nothing really game-breaking, and that obviously leaves a very clear slot at the top, a sort of power vacuum waiting to be filled, and Spiritborn is the destined one to fill it. Blizzard logic has pretty much for any game they've made in the past always been to make new things a tad stronger than they maybe should be, to make people actually engage with them to begin with, and then maybe try and rein them in and nerf them a little bit later on. Spiritborn is insanely strong, and it's not a matter of the whole class just being busted, so much as a couple of specific mechanics and synergies that have just such wide-reaching effects that you can make a bunch of different build concepts around them. Obviously, there are some standout at the top of the pile combinations, and we'll talk about that later, but first I want to talk about the two major things that can make nearly any Spiritborn build incredibly powerful just by themselves. The first is the Unyielding Hits aspect. This makes it so when you hit an enemy with a gorilla skill, it increases your raw weapon damage stat by a percentage of your current armor value. This is stupidly potent for multiple reasons. The first is that it increases raw weapon damage, so this applies underneath every other bonus in the game, sort of like raising skill ranks does. The only exception is this won't help things like Thorns procs, which are not calculated with weapon damage itself, but for nearly everything else, raw weapon damage is an unbelievably strong thing to increase. The second part is the actual conversion rate percentage on the affix. Depending on the slot that you put it on and the actual rank of the codex aspect that you have, it can convert a massive chunk of your armor value into a straight up attack increase. The third part is that it does not stop you from increasing this actual conversion at armor cap. You do not get any damage reduction past 1000 armor after the stat squish reached on the each difficulty tier, but you can still increase your armor past that number. It can actually be a higher number than 1000, and this aspect scales with your armor gained even over the cap, and so this aspect lets you use a ton of armor affix slots and masterworking and tempering in places that is intended to be a defensive gain to instead just stack ridiculous amounts of armor and funnel it through this aspect to gain just insane levels of weapon damage, which again is underneath every other additive and multiplier in the game. It's the base layer of damage calculation. You may think this is restricting because it says gorilla skills, but the already commonly most picked primary Spirit Hall option, as far as I can tell, will be gorilla. That is just the most palpable damage change, and it gives you a ton of barrier generation as well, which is great for its own reasons too. This also makes all skills have the gorillas tag too, which means that all skills will keep this effect active if you have that Spirit Hall selected. That said, this is obviously just sort of an ultra high-end concept. This aspect is incredible super early in leveling, especially because the first 4 world tiers do not give you armor penalties, and weapon damage itself is harder to get than armor at that stage of the game. So if you find this aspect early on, you want to use it for sure, but when you reach the sort of endgame climb from Torment 1 to 4, your gear will not have all the stats you want. You won't be able to pick it very indiscriminately. You probably won't be masterworking the exact perfect affixes on as you go through this unless you go through it really slowly, and each torment tier just straight up lowers your armor by 250. And so this source of power is essentially really good at the start and at the deep end game, where you have your perfect stats, where you're comfortably in Torment 4. Not to say that it is bad in between those, it is always a fantastic legendary aspect, but it is at its strongest at those two ends of the spectrum of playtime. That said, specifically in the middle part, it has a very direct competitor as another underlayer for build power, and that is Mystic Circles. Mystic Circles are a sub-power for Spiritborn tied to 4 different legendary aspects, one representing each of the Guardians. Each aspect equipped gives you a base 25% lucky hit chance to create a Mystic Circle under you. Then, depending on the specific aspect, casting a skill of a different Guardian type will add an effect to what the circle does. The big important one here that will be the base of a lot of people's power for that stage of the game is Plains Power, the Jaguar version of the Mystic Circle. This makes Mystic Circles increase your damage by a multiplier, which is given for each ferocity stack that you have. Ferocity stacks normally just give you attack speed, which is also great, and these mostly come from Jaguar related skills or interactions or Spirit Hall. One of the main combos with this is the Duelist aspect as well, which raises your maximum ferocity stacks possible, and then the Hunter ultimate skill, which shoots you to your ferocity cap and then overcaps it by 5 when you use it. And so you can get around 15 stacks with this simple combination, and this ultimate skill has the ability to reset itself too, so you can keep it active pretty frequently. So if you put the legendary power on an amulet or even a weapon, the multiplier that it gives you with that many stacks is more than doubling your overall damage while the effect is active. Not to mention that Mystic Circle potency is both something that you can get as a stat from a paragon glyph and from offensive tempering slots too, to increase this multiplier even further. Then you can combine that with the aspect of Sky Power, the other Mystic Circle, the one for eagles, which makes it bring these circles along with you whenever you evade. Stick that on a pair of boots that reduces evade cooldown on hits, and then you have a circle that follows you around and buffs you heavily while it's active. The fun thing is, while I would argue it is probably inefficient to do so, you can mix these two bases of power together, because one of the Mystic Circle aspects also boosts your armor, so that's a fun idea too. All in all, this is to say that while Spiritborn is going to have a surprising amount of high-end build diversity, as far as like the core focused skill, not literally core or focused skills, but I mean there will be payback builds, there will be Razorwing builds, there will be ultimate skill builds, there will be poison builds, but every single one at its core, to be competitive, will scale off of either the Unyielding Hits aspect or Mystic Circles without fail, because those two synergies are just the cream of the crop level damage increases for the investment required for this class. These are the type of non-conditional increases that can make even weak skills perform decently if you put it around them. And so no matter how you play Spiritborn, if you use one of these two things properly, you will feel at least relatively strong. That said, now I want to talk about builds that I expect to shoot to the top come live servers, and the specific build that I wish worked better than it does. First and foremost, we need to talk about Quill Volley. This is the Eagle core skill, and the one that I use the most in my time playing Spiritborn for 2 main reasons. The first is that it has a fun scaling mechanic with number of feathers hitting targets, so shotgun blasting it is actually effective, but it also has good range itself for clearing more menial enemies out, so it just feels good to use. The second is that Eagle skills have a very natural place for power gain because of the Harmony of Ebikawa unique helmet. This helmet gives you increased damage for a skill depending on how many different Spirit Guardian tags that it has, and makes secondary Guardians also give it a tag. The generally best primary Guardian is Gorilla, as we talked about earlier, but even more so in endgame because of both Barrier being a really good defensive option, and because it makes all skills have Gorilla tags to activate the Unyielding Hits aspect that we talked about too. So this makes your Eagle skills now also count as Gorilla skills, so 2 skill tags now. Then the generally best secondary Spirit Hall choice is Jaguar. This increases maximum ferocity, which is good in itself, but more importantly, it gives you 1 stack of ferocity anytime that you kill a regular enemy, or if you just hit a boss in the first place. Because of the unique helmet, this then also applies the Jaguar skill tag to all of your Eagle skills, so now they have 3 tags, and this makes Quill Volley quite strong as an option in itself, as well as making things like Stinger or even Touch of Death with the actual Core's Tilde enhancement taken the other option to get all of these 3 bonuses, but I'll be talking about that build in a moment. The other hint of this build is the Rod of Kepeleke unique weapon. This makes core skills count as basic skills, so Quill Volley is now both basic and core. It makes it cost 0 resource, but when you hit maximum resource, it gets a guaranteed crit with bonus crit multiplier per point of resource that you have. So now we also have a way to scale a massive crit damage multiplier, a really high scaling effect with stacking maximum resource increases too. And before you say that would actually be a sort of anti-synergy, because it would take longer to build up the effect even if the singular hit is larger. But no, because there's also a unique ring for Spiritborn that refunds up to 50% of recent resource spent when you crit. And I should mention that there is also a key passive for Spiritborn form that gives you bonus skill ranks when you hit with the same basic skill 3 times in a row, and cooldown reductions when you hit with the same core skill 3 times in a row. Because of the weapon, Quill Volley as a skill counts as both a basic and a core skill at the same time, and thus triggers both bonuses every time you cast 3 times. This all comes together for an absolutely nasty combination of a setup. I'm using Plains Power and Mystic Circles in my footage because my gear is far from perfect, so I'm more in Torment 3, but at the top end you would definitely want Unyielding Hits and a focus on armor increases, and this is definitely going to be one of the best setups available for any class this season without a doubt. There will be variations on it past this, but that is the core of it all. The next main thing that I want to talk about for likely successful builds in deep endgame then is Centipede and the Poison focus. This has an incredible amount of interesting possibilities to synergize together, including the craze of the Dead God gloves, which basically just keep you from getting one shot ever by turning all damage you take into damage over time that you can heal up, and Centipede itself being incredibly healing heavy. But then the way that this combos with the Jacinth Shell chest piece, which does damage to you every second that you have your skills on cooldown, more damage per skill, but makes them essentially have 1/3 the normal cooldown timer in response, and also gives you a chance on hit to restore 10% maximum life. However, while this makes for fun builds, the absolute best poison build will actually probably function super similarly to the Quill Volley setup that we just talked about. There are a number of strong aspects or powers to boost specific poison skills, but the basis of the top tier poison builds will again be heavy armor stacking with the Unyielding Hits aspect, as the main poison skills will actually still scale off of weapon damage itself too, and there are even ways to build crit with poison for Spiritborn that will probably really pop off using Rod of Kepeleke and the ring combo that refunds resource spent once again, because this is just a really nasty 3-pronged synergy for anything that can work around it. The third major archetype that I want to talk about then is Thorns, and the version that I played around with the most was Rocksplitter. Rocksplitter is the gorilla basic skill, and it has an upgrade that makes every third cast in a row apply 100% of your Thorns value to the attack and spread it around a bit. You can combine this with Gorilla Spirit Hull to apply Thorns with every attack a second time, and with this we use the other Spiritborn unique helmet, Loyalty's Mantle, to double the Thorns applied with each hit and also double the barrier generated, as well as increasing our maximum stacks of resolve and lowering gorilla skill cooldowns too, notably Armored Hide. The main purpose of Armored Hide in this is that it both refills resolve stacks to maximum and gives you the bonus Thorns while active, so lower cooldown is massive, especially for the Colossal Paragon glyph, which increases damage per resolve stack that you have multiplicatively. Rocksplitter specifically, however, has its third hit, Thorns, calculated as part of the skill damage, rather than just raw Thorns value like the hits from the Spirit Hull does, so Rocksplitter is able to scale much further through things like basic skill damage increases, like the adaptability or Moonrise aspect. This increases the Thorns scaled output and makes it extremely hard. You can then mix this with the Mystic Circles concept that I talked about earlier, as it boosts all damage done rather than just weapon damage like Unyielding Hits, so this includes Thorns, and that adds a massive amount of damage to it. You can mix it with the Hubris Paragon glyph, which increases your Thorns by a percentage equal to your dodge chance, and Spiritborn has the Counterattack skill, which literally gives you a 100% dodge chance while it's active, and this theoretically would increase your Thorns by 100%, though this was seemingly bugged in the review build, but I'm told it should work properly on live servers, so we'll have to see exactly how high this build caps out with that fixed, especially as with the main damage scaling off of Thorns, we also get to use Razor Plate as a unique, and the difference between a non-ancestral Razor Plate and a full 4 Greater Affix Razor Plate is insanely large for the pure Thorns value. The final piece of this puzzle then is the other unique quarterstaff, Sepazantec. This makes basic skills always do their third hit effect, so Rocksplitter always applies the Thorn scaling, and then there's lots of impactful ways for Spiritborn to scale Thorns, such as bonus Thorns percentage with a barrier active, bonus Thorns percentage while enemies are poisoned, bonus Thorns percentage after using an ability with a cooldown. It's just a long list because they wanted Spiritborn to have the ability to make Thorns a properly high-end endgame build, and, well, it definitely does. Thorns build will be pretty up there. Then finally, this is the build concept that I wish worked, and I won't spend too long on it, but I do want to mention it. Payback is a gorilla skill that naturally has a cooldown. It increases the damage that it deals each time an enemy hits you, and it has an enhancement that makes it a core skill that spends all resource on cast to increase damage a massive amount. Of course, my first instinct upon seeing that specific wording was, what if we could pair that, of course, with Unyielding Hits, Rod of Kepeleke, and the resource refund ring combo, and the idea being, what if we could make Payback both consume all resource for the crit damage bonus from Kepeleke and its own core damage increase multiplier from the enhancement, as that would shoot straight to the moon with damage, right? Well, it turns out they can't both trigger at the same time. One effect will always take your resource before the other one can actually happen, and in this case it seems to be Kepeleke, as it gets the guaranteed crit and it hits for a lot of damage. Still, even given this, it does very well given the gear that I had while using it, but obviously If this combo had fully worked the way that I was hoping it would have been one of the best builds for the class for certain. I'm currently hoping that the devs consider changing this to work and overlap in the future, because I think that's a really cool combo that probably should work. That's pretty much it for today then, everyone. Lots to talk about in the coming days, including more specifics for Spiritborn 2, but today I sort of just wanted to get the ball rolling by just talking about how good the class feels, why it has clear potential to just be the best class, even with a subpar setup of abilities around it, and then of course the more potent examples that I expect to likely be the sort of peak of Spiritborn power in Season 6 specifically, assuming nothing changes massively from our review build, of course. I hope you've all enjoyed this then, and let me know your own thoughts on any of this or any questions that you have in the comments down below. Like if you liked the video, subscribe to the notification bell for more, and most importantly, ladies and gentlemen, until next time, stay sweet.
Josh, Cotton, and Hollow with the videos, dropping the humor like a hammer on your tippy toes, bringing entertainment on a daily arrangement to take our insanity and turn it into entertainment. Yes, I said entertainment twice, to reiterate that it is nice to look into your faces on a mostly daily basis when you let us in your homes to make the whole world a stage. Goodbye.